I'll be now the longest running Today Show co-host since Lisa Wilkinson. But I never thought that I would do anything like this. I never thought I would be the co-host of the Today Show. I never thought I'd be a reporter for 60 Minutes. There are much bigger things going on in people's lives, in our lives, beyond the comparisons of pay or the comparisons with other shows or ratings and that sort of stuff. I'm very proud to be a migrant woman on Australian television, and particularly from a Middle Eastern background. I think we don't often see women like me on television, even now. The guy that you see on the television is the guy who I sit next to every single day. The audience is very smart. They will work you out. If you're a phony, they'll pick it straight away. I mean, you have to be yourself.
Sarah Arbo, welcome back to the Stella podcast.
Thank you for having me again, Sarah. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Very good.
I mean, it is the time of year where you are back at work.
Yes.
This year.
Yes.
As am I, in fact, and so are millions of Australians. But also everyone struggles a little bit. Can I ask you, as you're preparing for another year ahead at work, what did you most miss about work when you were on your Christmas summer break?
Yeah.
And what are you struggling a little bit to get into the swing of again?
Well, how long can the list be?
It can be as long as you like it. We've got all year, literally.
We've got all year. No, I think what I am most looking forward to in terms of returning to work are just being back with my colleagues on the desk every day, at everyone who works behind the scenes as well. I actually love my job and I love the people who I work with. They are so fabulous. They are so wonderful. They're so easy. We all get along really well. And that's not just the people who I work on screen with, it's the team behind the scenes as well, because they work their butts off. And I love how collegial it all is too. So I've missed them over the break and I just can't wait to dive back in with them. And also just to communicate with our viewers on a daily basis. It's so nice that's one of the delights of what we do on the Today Show is sort of that live interaction with our viewers. And to hear from them firsthand. And that's what I think makes our show, unique, obviously, in terms of the broadcast landscape, but also what makes it really special. And I think to have that one-on-one time with those who actually watch our show and who are willing to share their stories with the rest of the nation, that's pretty special. So, yeah, I can't wait to chat with them again.
Is there a part that you're worried about the holiday glow will fade quickly? Obviously, when
you're talking about sleep deprivation,
I was going to say, I feel
like
like it's always the elephant in the room. Is
yes.
that alarm that's set for somewhere in the 3 a.m.
Yes.
realm? But is it that or is it something else?
The sleep dep is definitely the most difficult part of the job, and it's always the part that you struggle with, I think, early on in the year as well when you return from, I remember at the end of last year, the thing I was most looking forward to, everyone was like, oh, what are you doing tomorrow, being the Saturday after I finished up on the Friday? And my answer was just to sleep, because you catch up on so much sleep that you've missed throughout a year and you try and make up for it over those sort of 4 or 5 weeks that you have off. So yes, that's definitely, I guess, the biggest adjustment that you make at the start of every year. And to be honest, it's the kind of the struggle I face every Monday as well, because you kind of get back into a normal human rhythm over the weekend and then, there's that 3 a.m. alarm on a Monday that shocks you awake. So that'll be the hardest part, definitely.
As you go into your 4th year, so it has been 3 full years that you have sat behind that desk, 3 full years since you and I last spoke. Has that side of things gotten easier? And then all of the amazing but also challenging parts of the job, the amount of live TV that you're anchoring, the adrenaline that comes with live TV, the risk of it, the interaction with the audience, but then also the constant speculation and glare of being on breakfast TV, which anyone that's ever worked on that landscape knows. There's something about that it's the intimacy of the environment. Are you feeling more comfortable about that as you head into your 4th year?
Yeah, I am. And I think, we just spoke about sleep, right? Sleep is always going to be the struggle with a job like this. But once you're sort of on air, it does dissipate somewhat, because your adrenaline just kicks in and you have 3.5 hours of live television to get through. Sometimes it can be longer, of course, depending on the day and the broadcast, whether there's breaking news or rolling coverage. So the sleep part is always the hardest part, but you do kick into gear. And I think that's what I love about it, because if you didn't love what you did and you didn't love the people who you worked with, you just wouldn't do this job. You just wouldn't, because it's too hard to wake up every morning at 3 a.m. to work in an environment that is unnatural, in a studio and you've got cameras. That's not what people do on a regular and daily basis, but it is what we do. So, we're a bunch of weirdos maybe, but we do it because we love it. And yeah, that for me is what makes getting through each day worthwhile, because you just love the people who you work with and who you speak with. So that gets you through. I think you get over the sleep pretty quickly. By the end of the show, I am like a zombie though, because you've just exerted so much energy into producing that live television for so long, and then you come off and it's just like, oof, a sack of potatoes. I'm just ready to chill out, not talk to anyone and do nothing. And then you recalibrate, you start preparing for the next day, and off you go again. It's interesting because I think, Sarah, when we last spoke, it was probably, a couple of months into...
it was around March 2023,
yeah,
so you were really still quite new to the role full time.
So I think I had so much to learn in that time, because prior to actually taking on the Today Show hosting role full time, I'd only filled in for 3 weeks over the summer prior, and then, a number of weeks during the year. So it was still very new to me. And I think everyone who's sat in my position before me has had an extended anyone who's sat in the role before me has had extended exposure to that role, whether it's hosting the weekend version of the Today Show or a breakfast television show, or, being in a different role within the team. So I never had that. So I think for me, it really did feel like I was being thrown in the deep end. I'm not one to shy away from a challenge. And when an opportunity like that comes up, you take it, right? Because I hate the question, what if, what if, what if? I just don't want to ever wonder about anything. So it's so much more comfortable now, 4 years into the role, as I start my 4th year, because I understand, and I understand what's involved in the role. I understand the breakdowns, the segments. Timing was a difficult one for me to get across. Sorry, this is probably boring. I'm getting into the weeds here, but getting into an ad break and out of an ad break, and how long each segment might last for. You might want to interview the Prime Minister for 10 or 15 minutes, but you've only realistically got 5 or 6 minutes if you're lucky sometimes, and that depends on how the other segments before it have gone. So that's something that I've become a lot more aware of. And, obviously sitting next to someone like Karl Stefanovic, who's a veteran of the industry and he's been doing that job for more than 20 years, he understands it, and it's literally like clockwork in his mind. So to be able to learn from him as well, and to understand why we need to get to where we need to get to at whatever point that might be, that's become a lot more familiar to me now. And even, to be honest, just sort of understanding the audience a lot more too, because I came from longer form, when people have more time to sit down and sink into a story on 60 Minutes. The shortest story I think I did at 60 Minutes might have been 10 minutes.
And I think to develop the muscle to be able to move between those two things is fairly rare.
Yeah.
Because there are people that are in all forms of broadcasting, and especially also in the era of social media, and people that are very good at, snackable content, and then people that can do long form. But to be able to do both, the timing and the rhythm, it is almost like elite athlete level, I would imagine.
Are you calling me an elite athlete, Sarah? I'll take it if you are.
I mean, maybe we can start thinking about the Olympics. On the subject then of long form journalism, as you say, you've got a lot of experience in that, and it's been a shift getting into that unrelenting pace of live breakfast TV, where there is nowhere to hide, and you've probably got people in your ear. You go, hello, welcome. Okay, oh, yep, good. We've got to go now. There's breaking news. Something's happening. It's about to run into the news bulletin. Sitting down with me today in a long-form interview like this, how do you feel about it, being on the other side of the microphone? Would you rather be asking the questions or answering them?
I think you know the answer to that, don't you, Sarah?
Well, let's just say, Sarah, if I told you that this afternoon after our interview I'm going to get root canal therapy, would you say, I'll take the root canal therapy rather than sitting here with you?
I would take the root canal therapy rather than sit here answering questions, yes. And not because I don't want to talk to you, but I would prefer to be asking you the questions. And you know what, I did want to ask you as well, and you might not use this, but you asked me about how I feel 3 years into my role. You interviewed me only a couple of months into my role. You're interviewing me now as I start my 4th year. What have you noticed? Has anything changed? Have you noticed a change?
I really have. I think what you have spoken about there, about that aspect of genuinely, it is, I think, elite athlete level, having to anchor that many hours of live TV that you do. Karl once said, in this podcast, there's very few people on Australian TV that would have as many what he called flying hours under their belt as him. And I think as the landscapes become even more volatile, it's probably less now. So I can even see that it looks effortless, and as with all things that look effortless in this world,
it's not.
The reality is anything
There's a lot of
but.
effort. Yeah.
And I also think there's just the shift of pace, because you are one moment interviewing the Prime Minister or a politician. There's breaking news, so you're bringing information to people while it's still literally coming to hand and people are running around trying to establish facts. But then you might be flipping and talking to the person that caused big outcry at the dinner party scene in last night's episode of Maths. So it's the light and shade, as they used to call it in newsrooms. I think that fact that you've really relaxed into it has actually become quite noticeable.
Yeah, and I think that's key. I think it does take time and I think experience to feel as though you can relax into a role, because there is a huge responsibility that comes with what we do, right? We have to get it right. We have to be fair. We have to be mindful of the audience we're talking to, the person we're talking to in any given interview or any given segment. And so I think being able to relax into that, and, there are moments that are easier than others, obviously, and there are times when you can get carried away with a story, and there are times where you can kind of become quite emotional and overwhelmed with a story as well. Speaking to the light and shade that you mentioned there are times when you just go, I cannot believe this is happening to somebody. I can't believe this awful experience that somebody's been through. But you're also there for moments of incredible jubilation for people too, and to be able to share that joy. Like I remember there was late last year we spoke with Ariane Titmus right after she'd retired from swimming, right? And she's such a beautiful young woman, in her early 20s. She's achieved so much already, and just to listen to her speak, she's such an you've met her, she's such an impressive young woman, and you're there for this moment of hers, which is not an easy decision to make. But she's communicating through us to a broader audience who adores her. And so that's a great privilege. And to be able to share that with her is really special. And I will never, ever take anything like that for granted, because it's a really unique insight that we get.
How's that aspect of the role sat with you as you've become more and more used to the landscape? Because there's, as I said earlier, there's a risk and an adrenaline attached to live TV, because anything could be said by yourself, by the person that you're interviewing, and then, of course, by one of your colleagues, especially Karl, who again is the first to admit that he feels like he's always 1 second away from cancellation. How there have been moments that have shocked you still, or have you become a little more prepared for everything, as much as anyone can be prepared for the fact that anything could be spectacularly right or wrong in just a couple of seconds of on-air time?
Oh, Sarah, can I just say, I live for the moments that catch you off guard, because they happen so infrequently, because people these days are often so aware about the fact that they're on television or they're on message or so and so, that they're on message and so on. So I think when we do catch somebody off guard, or when we're caught off guard, I live for those moments, because it's so refreshing, it's so exciting, it's unpredictable. And obviously live TV by its very nature is unpredictable, but you generally have a sense of what's going to happen, roughly when, and so on. But to have no expectation of what somebody might say, that's cool. I like that. I'm here for it.
Can I talk a little bit about what we spoke about the last time you were on the show, which was actually your childhood?
Yes.
You were born in Syria,
Yes.
and you and your family moved to Melbourne. You were only 4 years old. When you were growing up, we didn't see a lot of diversity on, well, not just Australian screens, really anywhere that much in the Australian culture. Of course, with the exception of, at the time, networks like SBS, which you would later go on to work for. How did that, if at all, shape the woman that you are today, the way that you have approached your career, and the stories that you want to tell?
I'm very proud to be a migrant woman on Australian television, and particularly from a Middle Eastern background. I think we don't often see women like me on television, even now, even as you and I speak, and I think that we can probably do a little bit better in that space. And it's not like, I think when we have these discussions, it's can sometimes be framed in a sort of a box ticking kind of exercise, right? Or it can be seen in a way that, okay, we need to hire somebody diverse because of the way they look or where they're from or whatever. But I think it's also about different perspectives and insights. My upbringing is very different to your upbringing. My upbringing is very different to Carl's and Jane's and Danica's. So I think the fact that we all have different lives like that lends itself to our roles and helps us, I suppose, communicate better with our audience, because there'll be people out there who have a very similar upbringing to me. And I think that's a really important point to make as well here. We all know that Australia has been built on migration, right? And multiculturalism is one of those things that we hold dear in this country, and that we take great pride in. So I think we need to be able to actually champion that, not just sort of, say, oh, Sarah's on television, she was born in Syria, great, tick that box. I think it's really important to embody the qualities that migrants bring to this country, because I'm so incredibly proud of my parents and what they did and the sacrifices that they made. And I can't ever imagine making the same sacrifices that they did. They up and left a place that they've always known. They left their families. They literally left with the clothes they were wearing and a few suitcases, jumped on a plane and settled in Melbourne. I was 4 years old at the time. My younger sisters were 2 and, barely 12 months. So that is pretty brave. Well, that's very brave to do something like that. And I'm in such awe of them. And I think that always makes me a little bit emotional when I think about what they've done, because they sacrificed so much for our upbringing, and for us to have a better life. And, it's so special to see them, my parents, excel so well in this country as well. To represent a migrant background and experience is really important on Australian television, because it tells a different story, and it's not one that we often see, but it's one that is very often reflected in Australia. So I think it's really important. I feel really passionately about that.
I think it is such an important point that we don't talk about enough, is that it's easy for these things to become buzzwords, things that we talk about in reports and stories, but what does it actually mean? You spoke about that connection with the audience that you have developed over the last 3 years, and it's real because you're there, as I've said, in their screens, wherever their screens are, whether they're watching on their device on the way into the office or they're watching in their living room while they're running around getting dressed for the day ahead. What do you hear from people that feel represented and seen, and their experience mirrored or validated from yours?
Well, that's exactly what it is, Sarah. Like it's actually that sense of pride that the community has when they see me on the television. And I guess because of the role that I have, they get to see a little bit more of who I am and my personality. And that gives them a bit more of an insight into my life. And I think within my life, they can see reflected their own. And that's really special to me. And I take that as a great privilege, a great responsibility, and a great honour, because I'm so proud of anyone who's been able to pack up their lives in search for a better life, whatever situation they may be fleeing from their home country. My parents came here at a time Australia needed skilled migrants. They needed to help build the economy and build the country. In more recent times, you see some people come to Australia because they're fleeing a situation in their home country that's threatened their lives. And so I think when I hear from migrant communities, it's so humble. Well, humbling's not the right word. It's so heartening to hear from the audience who might have the same background as me or a similar background as me, because they do feel like they are being seen. They feel represented. They feel as though there's something about my life that resonates with them, and that fills me with great pride. So I think it's really important that we reflect their stories and that we try and tell their stories more often on our television screens. And there is, that there is a greater awareness of that these days. I think that's changing. And so it's lovely to be able to represent the migrant community. And it's a pretty common story. Mine is a pretty common story. I think it's like, I can't remember the stats, but it's something like, a third of all Australians are either born overseas or have a family member who is born overseas. So my story is not that uncommon. It's actually more common than not. So that's really nice to be able to embody that.
And it is just so wild that even as we're heading into 2026, that common experience is still not represented in our corridors of power, our boardrooms, and in our popular culture and our Australian media.
Yeah, and I do notice that too. It's just, I think, you mentioned the corridors of power. If you look at Parliament these days, it isn't that diverse. It really isn't, whether it's federal level or state level. It's improving. And I mean, I think it will continue to improve. And I think, a lot of, I think a lot of migrants will probably perhaps enter those kinds of industries because they have become more comfortable in their new settings and new surroundings, and they feel like they do want to create change, or they do want their community to be better represented. So I think that's changing.
When it comes to the news cycle, it's been a very volatile few years, both internationally and here in Australia. And there are stories, of course, that come up about immigration and racist comments are made by world leaders. Sometimes here in Australia, you've been, a few years ago were the target of a very unpleasant tweet from Mark Latham. But just stories that come up in the cycle about people fleeing for their lives and not necessarily being welcomed into other countries, including here in Australia. Sarah, how does that inform the way that you tackle stories as somebody that is covering breaking news or interviewing people that are often at the front line or the decision makers in terms of federal politicians?
I think you have to be very mindful of being inclusive. So you're not sort of dealing in silos here. You're not talking about people who come from very specific ethnic backgrounds or so on. So I think it's about being more inclusive and talking in general terms about the experience that is shared within Australia. And that is one of a nation that's built on migration. But there have been instances, of course, the quite public ones when we have seen racist tropes still being thrown around, and I mean it's sad. I think it's an interesting argument because I feel as though we are much better than that. Society has progressed a lot more than that. It's we have come a long way as a community, I think, when it comes to racism. But of course, there's always more to do, and it's really just about not fearing the other. What is there to be fearful of? Try and understand something you may not be familiar with. You don't need to be fearful. And so this concept of the other, I just think that's something that we should just, abolish, because we're all the same. Everyone's born equal. Everyone's born equal, and it's the opportunities that shape their lives that determine their outcomes, right? And obviously, there are circumstances where some people are better off than others. It's just the life that they're born into. But at the very core of it, we're all the same. We're all humans. And I think that common humanity is what needs to be celebrated. And that needs to be what drives us all to become better people. Because the more you understand about an area or someone or something or a culture that you're not familiar with, the more likely you are to be more understanding in general about what their experience might be. And you know what? You might learn something as well from that. Don't shy away from that. Take it on.
Have you had moments where I think a lot of journalists would agree sometimes the most special moments are where somebody might reach out and to effect say that you've changed the way that they thought about something, or that they didn't have empathy or compassion for somebody or a situation until they read or saw or heard or watched a story?
I like to think that empathy and sympathy are one of the driving forces of what I do as a journalist, because I find it quite easy to sit there and listen to somebody and to better understand their story and to sort of walk in their shoes for the period of that interview, right? And then to take something from that experience and learn from it myself. I am, for all intents and purposes, the other for a lot of people out there. Like how many people out there have met a Syrian migrant? I'm going to say not many, right? So I am somebody who has a different background to, the person sitting next to me on the tram, or the person sitting next to me, at a cinema or wherever we may be, at a footy field, So each person has their own unique story. And isn't that wonderful? That's why I love what I do, because I'm so interested and curious about other people. I find them more interesting than I find myself, so I just want to know more about them. And if we were all the same, life would be so boring.
You celebrated a milestone birthday late last year, turned 40 in November. You're an absolute spring chicken, Sarah Arbo. I have everybody in this studio from Gen Zs through to millennials, but so many women in their 50s and 60s and 70s have sat here. We talk a lot about visibility and the experience of women growing older. But for you, at the sprightly young age of 40, how did you feel about 40? Did it conjure up feelings of joy, elation, confusion, shock, relief?
I think, honestly, I just took it as another day, as another birthday. And the only startling thing about turning 40 is that now I have to tick a different box when I'm filling out a form. I'm in the 40 plus
Oh,
category, which is,
yes,
that kind of
yes.
brings you back down to earth. You're not Teflon anymore, are you?
I hate moving up in those boxes. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a privilege, but it is a moment.
But I'm going to embrace it because I just think, somebody said to me the other day, and it forces you to self-reflect, I think, when people make observations about you that you just kind of discount or you don't really give yourself enough credit for. But somebody said to me the other day, look at all that you've done or achieved by the age of 40. And I mean, I feel like, that's such a naff thing for me to say, and I feel like such a loser, even like I feel like a wanker saying
they
that.
were right.
But-
It's true. It's just
but
facts.
What it speaks to is that, I've worked so hard, I suppose, and I've been, obviously I've been fortunate. I've had incredible people along the way who have believed in me. But to think, when I look back, I'm so grateful for everything that I've been able to achieve by the time I'm 40. And so I think when I turned 40, again, it had to be brought to my attention, but just to reflect on that was pretty special. And I feel very lucky to be here. And I also feel like it's a sign that, in the past, I think, just sort of to go back on one of the themes that you mentioned before, growing up, I'd never thought that I would do anything like this. I never thought I would be the co-host of the Today Show. I never thought I'd be a reporter for 60 Minutes. And I think it's because I didn't necessarily see other women like me doing it. So these are the kinds of jobs that other people got. These aren't the jobs that people like me got. I've been entrusted in a role that has a great responsibility attached to it. And I feel that every single day. And so, yeah, when I reflect on being here at 40, I feel so grateful, and I feel as though I've got so much more to give, and there's so much more that I can learn as well, and not just in my role, but also just in life in general, and to impart that to the next generation. I think too, we're seeing, a fracturing, I suppose, of the media landscape. Like Karl and I presented an award at the TikTok Awards, late last year, and it was video creator of the year award, and the clips that were in it were literally not even a minute long, so the way people are consuming media is changing. And I think we still have such an important role, and we need to be able to communicate with that younger generation and that younger demographic, because we still represent, I think, in the broader broadcast landscape or the broader media landscape, news that needs to be told and stories that need to be heard.
I mean, I'm not sure if Karl Stefanovic, your co-host on the Today Show, is on TikTok, but he is on Instagram.
Yes.
And when you turn 40, you'll probably be embarrassed, but I'd just like to read a little bit of a very lovely tribute that he posted to you when on your 40th birthday. She'll hate this, he said. He knew. But who cares? I'm humbled and grateful to have strong women in my life, women who make my life, women like Sarah Arbo. What a privilege to know you. Your strength through adversity, your grace and your laugh are glorious. You show up, sister, every day. Happy birthday, 40th, says. I don't know if that was his typo or mine. You look like Madonna doing karaoke in Chinatown. Okay, it's got a bit of backstory there. Sarah, we've spoken a little bit about Australians heading back to work this year. It's a universal experience for most people. If you're lucky, you get on with the people that you work with. A lot of people have a good professional relationship with their colleagues, but they're not necessarily friends. Some people can have quite a tense relationship with their colleagues. You and Karl, as I think this message attests, have clearly struck up a really genuine friendship and connection. Yeah. Is that an accurate observation?
It is. It is. I was thrown into the deep end, as I said before, in this role. And Karl and I had only worked together a few times before I was sitting alongside him. Obviously, Karl is Karl, right? He's such an incredible force in the Australian broadcast media. So to sit alongside him would normally be an intimidating prospect, but he just made it so easy, and he sat there and let me be me. And he has this way, Karl, I think, of encouraging people to flourish in a very subtle way. He never tells you what to do, and he never, what's the word I'm looking for? He never shames you if he thinks you've done something wrong or something that he disagrees with. He lets you grow and he lets you flourish and he helps you along the way. And it's so subtle. the way he does that. And I'm eternally grateful for all the help that he's given me, along the way, and the support. And I think support is the key one here. He's been so supportive, knowing that, I was a cub going into this. I was just a little pup going into this role. And he'd been there. Like, I think he was 30 or so when he started his role on the Today Show. I think I just turned 37 when I took on the role full time. So still quite young. But he'd been there. He knows what it's like to start and not really know what the hell you're doing, because that's how I felt. And yeah, he sort of guided me through that. And he's let me be myself as well. And we've been learning about each other as we've been on the job. Like, so watching the people at home watching us live, we're also learning about each other in real time too. And it's been such a fun experience, because he is such a beautiful person who has a gorgeous heart, and he's loyal, but Karl is fiercely protective of those who he loves, and that's very clear. And I think he and I share that. I'm fiercely loyal and protective of the people I love, and anyone who knows me knows that I don't trust easily. I don't, I never ever speak about work to anyone. I never gossip. I don't do any of that sort of stuff. I'm a bit of a vault when it comes to anyone or anything. So I really appreciate that about him, and I think he appreciates that about me. And beyond our work relationship, we've had so much fun outside of work. And, Jazz is so beautiful. Harper, his daughter, of course, is just so beautiful too. He's become quite close, and they've become quite close with my husband, Cyrus. So it's really, we've gone out, we've spent evenings together, and it's just so much fun. He alludes to, he's taking the piss there with the Madonna reference, but that was off the back of a karaoke session. I think it was 2 years ago. It was after Derby Day, and we went to a karaoke bar, and it was so funny just because, karaoke is so silly, right? It's so loose. And
Love karaoke.
Everyone's a massive dog, but you just lean in, and as soon as Like a Prayer came on, I was gone. I stole the mic, and it was my time to shine. And I cannot sing, let me tell you, but I wasn't going to let anyone interrupt me. But it was one of those moments where I kind of took the reins early, and then the whole room was pumping. Everyone just got involved, and it was a lot of fun. I think there might be some video footage somewhere, but we'll just keep that under wraps.
All right. Well, I won't put you on the spot and ask you for a few bars of Like a Prayer, but a little sidebar. Excellent choice. Like
Great
a Prayer
song,
by
right?
Madonna. A lot of people, I think, always want to know about Karl. Of all the people that I have worked with or interviewed in my career, from international A-listers to really well-known people in the Australian media like yourself, there's something about Karl, and it's probably that 20 years, and I think just his persona. People really want to know about him, and I think you and I have spoken about this before. If you're ever walking through an airport or a public space, he sort of gets mobbed in, that he always laughs at, his wife Jasmine once said to him, what are you, Brad Pitt or something?
Well, he got mobbed at the TikTok Awards, which was so wonderful to see, because I was like, this is all, we're talking demographics under 25. I was like, well, if they know who Karl Stefanovic is, then we're in good hands. We're in safe hands. We're fine.
Yep, that's right. The TikTok crowd are all over it, you guys. What about you? Do people ask you about Karl, and what do you think people would find the most surprising aspect about Karl from the person that they think they know from 20 years on today?
I honestly don't think there's much the public doesn't know about Karl. So you've interviewed him before, right? He has been on our screens. And the thing about him is he is incredibly generous, and he's incredibly giving of himself as well, and perhaps at times he's probably put more out there than he wants to, or he's, it comes with the territory, I guess, but it's sort of, there isn't much about him that that the public doesn't know. To me, he's like that annoying but loving older brother. I adore him, and we have such a strong relationship, like we are brother and sister. But it's like the first, or second question people ask me after they say, what time do you set your alarm? Then they say, how's Karl? What's Karl really like? And I'm like, well, Karl's exactly as you see him. The guy that you see on the television is the guy who I sit next to every single day. So there's nothing, I wish I had some dirt that I could tell you about, but honestly, it's what you see is what you get.
I think that you're exactly right. I think it's, as Karl was the first person to say, all of his personality, like the clumsy bits and the silly jokes and the missteps, are all part and parcel of this incredibly gracious, authentic persona. And that also is, I think, why certain people flourish on a format like breakfast TV, because there really is nowhere to hide.
No,
It's very hard to
exactly.
sort of conceal who you are.
The audience is very smart. They will work you out. If you're a phony, they'll pick it straight away. I mean, you have to be yourself. As you say, there's nowhere to hide. And what you see is what you get. And I think that, I mean, that's the same with me. What you see is what you get. You know, I think when in those early stages when I was learning what to do, I certainly was a bit more guarded, not because I was trying to protect myself from anything, but just because I was trying to be mindful, you know, mechanically of the show. And I've been able to ease more into the role and ease more into embracing myself as well. Because I think what you don't realize when you take on a role like this is that you have to be comfortable with yourself. And I've not always been comfortable with myself. You know, I've not been the most confident person in the room. I'm probably still not I'm certainly not the most confident person in the room. And so those issues around self-esteem, you know, they're always there in the background. But because of the environment that we work in and the people who we work with, that enables me to feel comfortable and that enables me to be more myself. And, you know, I'm pretty proud of myself actually for coming out of my shell in that way, because in the past, you know, whether it's been 60 Minutes or whether it's been, you know, reporting or news reading at SBS or Channel 10 before that, it's sort of, it's never about you. And so that's just been ingrained in my head. And it's so tightly wound in my head. The story is never you. And it still isn't. But by its very nature, breakfast television does ask more of you, and it asks you to show more of yourself. And I've been able to embrace that, where it was perhaps a point of discomfort for me early on. I think now, because of, you know, what we spoke about earlier about who I represent beyond, you know, Sarah Arbo, who I represent to the audience. And you know, when I speak to people out there and when they approach me and say, thank you so much for representing us and representing our community, representing the migrant experience, that's really special to me. And the amount of times I've heard from young women, young girls sometimes, who are still in school, you know, they're doing assignments or whatever, and they're just like, I aspire to be a journalist, or I aspire to enter broadcast media, and seeing you on television just gives me that little bit more belief that I can do it too. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
You know, like that's so special and so like, I mean, I just can't believe it. You know, I go, wow, that's so beautiful that somebody's taken the time to say that.
Sarah, when you talk about that, I think all journalists relate to that. The story's not about you. You don't want it to be about you. What about when other people make it about you? And not obviously, yes, somebody like me sitting down asking you questions about yourself, but when headlines then get out there, whether that's you've walked to the shops and they're commenting on what you're wearing, or you're photographed with your lovely husband, who I'll ask about in a moment, but then professionally as well. There's constant speculation for people in roles like yours. One is always about ratings, you know, is the show doing well? What's going to happen next year? Also pay. I mean, a lot of people don't have to deal with people speculating about their pay for some reason. Okay, maybe I won't say for some reason. I'm sure I've written about it myself in the past, but what people in the media get paid is always a source of speculation. And then for you, there's also like, well, are they, you know, is Sarah going to be back on the show next year? Is this show going to change networks? What's happening over here? Is that person getting paid more than that? How do you navigate that aspect, the sort of unfortunate, more tricky aspect that comes with your role?
Yeah, it's weird. I think it's really weird because I've always approached my job as a responsibility to the public. And so, yeah, that side of it is I mean, I still don't fully understand it. I don't understand why people are interested in that side of it. You know, so yeah, it's weird. I don't know. It can be silly, but also you just remind yourself that like there are so many people out there with much bigger problems every day. You know, I think there are much bigger things going on in people's lives, in our lives, beyond, you know, the comparisons of pay or the comparisons with other shows or ratings and that sort of stuff. You know, at the end of the day, we try and do the best job that we can. And we have such beautiful, loyal viewers out there who do tune in every day, and it's for them that we turn up.
When you're having a day, whether it's something in your life, I mean, it could be, you know, something's happened at home or with an extended family member, or there's a headline in the story, in the news that's a bit, oh gosh, and then you have to show up and do your job.
Yeah.
And whether it's something that people know about or not, what's your toolkit to sit there and get on with the job, which again, a lot of people all around us rally every day. We all show up for work when whatever's going on. But what's unique in your role is that public-facing nature of it.
Yeah, yeah. I think you just it's so funny. I think, like, I often think about my two sisters, right? One of them's a doctor. She is a pediatric specialist, and the other one is a physio who's worked in palliative care. And I just think, how do they get through their days when they are dealing with people who are literally in life or death situations every single day? You know, I'm not dealing with that every single day. They have to approach their job in, I guess, a more clinical way. But that does, in a way, translate to what we do as well, because you have to kind of remember that you've still got, well, it's a 3.5 hour show. So depending on when something happens, you've still got an hour to get through or 2 hours to get through, whatever. That's not to say, though, that you don't get caught up in some of those moments, right? I remember there was a recent experience with Tabitha Ackret, whose beautiful daughter, Mackenzie, was stabbed 78 times by, a former partner of hers, and he was given a woefully inadequate sentence. And just talking to her and the way her incredible resilience and strength was able to shine through in such an eloquent and articulate way, just moved me. It brought me to tears, and I just couldn't. I tried to contain myself. I was a bit of a blubbering mess by the end of that interview, but it's because you realize that there is so much hardship and there is so much adversity out there, and people have gone through absolute fucking shit in their lives. And you know what? We are so lucky that we get to sit at this desk in a studio in a safe surrounding and do the same thing every day. And we're so privileged to be able to meet people who are making a difference in this world. Tabitha, for example, has gone on to enact change. So there's going to be a new mandatory minimum sentence when it comes to domestic violence offences in New South Wales. I mean, that's amazing. That's world changing. That is life changing for anyone who ever, tragically has to go through a horrific experience like that. So that kind of, those moments are really hard to escape. And you just wouldn't be human if you didn't turn into a blubbering mess like I did live on national television. But I was just caught up in the moment. And I think, judging from the reaction, that we got afterwards too, so was the audience. The audience was also a blubbering mess and couldn't fight back the tears listening to her. So that, it's important, I think, to remember that even though, I might have given myself a bit of a whack for crying on air and looking like a blubbering dork, at the end of the day, we're all human and everyone feels things.
As I say, Karl, when he was kicking off his 20th year, I was asking him about yourself and all of the female co-hosts that he has sat alongside. And he essentially said that he will never now work with anyone else but you, which I suppose lends a question for me to ask you, do you feel the same way? But also, I think it's a really good point that he made. I mean, there's been always speculation whether that's gender double standards in the industry or just the fact that Karl is just, ended up becoming someone that was there for 20 years and quite iconic in the landscape. Even when he decides to leave, you will become the veteran of the desk and somebody else would come in. So 2 questions there. How do you feel about that? I'll quote him. He said, I genuinely have no interest in working with anyone else. Do you feel the same? And then, not to contradict that, but let's throw forward a little bit to 5-10 years. Is this something that you would see yourself staying in? And then, because the show has evolved and grown with the different people that are sat behind the desk, it could, evolve into something else.
I've never really been able to answer that question in terms of where I see myself in 5 to 10 years. I guess the only way I can answer that is to say that I love what I'm doing now. And if I still feel this way about it in 5 or 10 years, then I still want to be doing that job in that time, right? Because I would never have expected to be doing it. Well, I never saw myself doing this. I never saw myself doing 60 Minutes before that. I never saw myself reading the news on SBS before that. So I've been so grateful for every opportunity that I've taken, and every opportunity I've taken has come with great consideration. I've never sort of flippantly said, yeah, let's give this a go. And while that has been a part of the decision, yes, I do want to give this a go. It's always been from the perspective of taking on a new challenge. And that's what's been my driving force throughout my career. And so as long as I have that thirst to be challenged, that will continue. I don't know what that next challenge might be. I don't know what that next iteration is. At the moment, I love what I'm doing. And, hopefully I continue to feel this way about any job that I'm in, in the years to come. And I love working with Karl. He is such a force, but he has so much heart as well, behind the persona who you see on television, who, as I said, I think who you see on TV is exactly who he is. But I've seen him in more intimate settings, and I've seen him in more vulnerable settings as well. And the experiences that he and I have shared over the past 3 years have been really special, and there are things I talk to him about and he talks to me about that we wouldn't share with other people, and that will never go beyond our conversation either. So to have that kind of trust or faith in somebody is really unique. And we do share a really close bond and a real strength and faith in one another. And that's really important. And, he's obviously had quite a number of different co-hosts. And, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, as obviously I'm going now into my 4th year as the co-host of the Today Show. I'll be now the longest running Today Show co-host since Lisa Wilkinson. For various reasons along the years, obviously there have been different reasons, but that's, I kind of just sat with that for a second, and I was like, okay, I'm stepping into something a bit different now, a bit new now. And I'm stepping into it with Karl by my side. And that's really special. I love working with him, and I feel very fortunate to be working with him. And whatever he decides to do next, whatever that may be, you just look at the team, and even me, you don't know how long you're going to be anywhere, but you look at the team around you, and I have so much faith that the show will always flourish and will always be in safe and good hands because of the people who are working to make it the best product it can be.
Because as we were saying earlier in the chat, working with people that you genuinely like and trust is something that we all wish for, whatever our job is, especially in a job so intense. And the reason I wanted to read Karl's words back was because you have been a successful pairing. When I'm not signing any rumours here, you're going into the 4th year of the show for you together. I think it's just very telling and wonderful, I think, that in a game, in an industry where people will snipe against each other and plant stories against each other, let's be honest, happens all around us. The absolute opposite of that is happening on that show with the two of you.
Yeah.
And I think those were fighting words for him, and it really is testament to the relationship that you have, and it must really create what we see on air, is that you've really got each other's back.
It's so beautiful. I woke up to that Instagram post. Sorry, I know this is going back a bit, but you can edit. I woke up to that Instagram post on my 40th birthday. So he posted it before I was even awake. I think my birthday fell on a Saturday. And I just welled up, and I was sitting next to my husband, and I was like, Cyrus, have a look at this beautiful message this beautiful post that Karl's just put up, and this incredible message alongside. He nailed it. She'll hate this because I hate any kind of
He knows
attention.
you.
He knows me. It just was so beautiful. And he has a way with words that I don't.
Let me ask you before we finish up about your husband, Cyrus. Of course, you were living in Melbourne, both moved to Sydney for the Today Show. How are you adjusting to life in Sydney? I mean,
Cyrus is my best friend, as well as my husband. And the incredible support that he's shown me throughout my career, not just with this move to Sydney, but throughout my career, has allowed me to get to this point in my career. He has never said no to anything. He's never complained about anything. Nothing's ever been too hard. And so, the move to Sydney, it's so interesting because I've pushed back on this notion of moving to Sydney from Melbourne for as long as I could have. Obviously, in a role like the Today Show co-host, you can't do that. But we've embraced Sydney life, and he loves it too. I mean, he's a runner, so he gets up in the mornings, and he's beautiful. Like, he'll watch our show and he'll still have it streaming while he's running.
So that's why your audience are everywhere, aren't they?
They're everywhere, yes. But there's just no way I'd be here without his incredible support and getting through every day. And I still call him every single morning on my drive home from the show, even though I'm going to see him, in whatever, like I'll see him that day. I'll see him later that morning. I still call him every day after the show. He's still the person I turn to every single time. So I, and we don't always share the same opinion. We might disagree on many things, but that's what I love. I think about just in general. I don't want people to live in silos. I want people to be open to conversations, and I want people to be open to discussions and to different perspectives, because that's what makes us all stronger and smarter and more empathetic.
With your husband, he's been described by one media outlet as, quote, rarely seen husband.
Do you know, every time that title comes up again, his friends rib him like to no end. It's like, the rarely seen husband's back.
Publicity shy husband was another.
That is true. That is true.
Well,
yeah.
That's, I think, what's interesting then. You yourself, as established, would probably rather be having root canal therapy than sitting here doing this big major stellar interview. But for him, being married to somebody that is so well known and in such a high profile job, how does he navigate that aspect of the job and your job in his life? And getting that ribbing from his friends as publicity shy husband.
The rarely seen husband is the funny one. It gets us every time. It's not as though he's hiding.
No, I know.
It's just that he's not in the media. And so he doesn't have to be just because I am. I think that for some reason that seems to be hard to understand for some people. But it's like, no, mate, I've got a weird job and I've got a weird life, but he doesn't, And so he, I think for my, when we were celebrating my 40th birthday on air last year, and, they wanted to get my family, obviously they're in Melbourne, so they got them up via video link, but they were like, oh, Cyrus, can you just come on set, just wish Sarah a happy birthday. And he was like, absolutely not. He was just saying to me, are you going to kill me if I don't come on the telly? I'm really sorry. Do you mind if I don't do it? I will if you really want me to, but I really don't want to. And I was like, oh my goodness, no. I don't want you to do anything you're not comfortable with. It's just not who he is.
Yeah.
But it's not like he's so engrossed in the media. I mean, I feel like sometimes he knows more than I do when it comes to the media. He'll read cover to cover of a newspaper because he's interested in it, not out of necessity, So he would be an excellent journalist or broadcaster, but he's just so not interested in anything on camera or beyond. He's happy in his patch. He's happy doing what he does.
Look, I have to let you go, but I have to give the final word to you. As one of the best-known interviewers in Australia, what have I missed, Sarah? What would you have asked yourself? Is there anything you've been sitting here thinking, when's she going to ask me about that? And now's the chance.
No, I just think, is there? No, you are an excellent journalist, Sarah. You know that. No, I think we've covered most things. There are certain stereotypes, I guess, that come with the media and those who work in the media, and that's always puzzled me. I've never fit into a mold, I guess. And so, whatever stereotypes might exist around media and the people on the media, I just think increasingly we're seeing less of that cookie cutter kind of model of a broadcaster. And I'm here for it. I just think here we are, blemishes and all, grateful for the opportunity to be speaking to an audience every single day. And I think we're imperfect. I'm imperfect, just like other people have imperfections. And I think that's what is most valuable, because you kind of go, this is real. With all the imperfections that come with me, it's real, it's authentic. And I hope that resonates with people. And I hope that they see a bit of themselves in us when they watch the show.
I think they absolutely do, whether they're at the TikTok Awards or running around the harbour city, watching on their phone, or sitting in their living room while they're having their morning cup of coffee. Sarah Arbo, thank you so much for kicking off the working year. We're sitting down with me. All the best for 2026. Yeah. Hopefully we will sit down again before we're celebrating your 20th year
my goodness.
On today. Sarah's like, let me just get through the year ahead, please. As you said, you're not a big person for 5-year and 10-year plans. And of course, you can see Sarah Arbo on Today on Channel 9 each weekday. Sarah, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, Sarah. You're beautiful.